All right. We've made it. So far, technology is
We
working, but I feel like I do little like technology prayers every morning. We're just going to give people a minute to join us, Darrel. So we'll just hang out here and drink our coffee for a minute or so. But it sure feels good to see your face.
Okay.
Cheers.
Good to see you. Oh, mine is
There you go.
Royal University Cup.
Oh, I like that. And are you a black coffee drinker? How do you doctor your favorite coffee?
Technology is not being to us today.
No.
I hear some words quite clearly and others kind of break up. Tech, though it has come along, is still in some ways very undependable at times. But it's so good to be with you this morning, and we'll muddle through with technology. And if my answer has nothing to do with what you asked, just accept it anyway.
Okay, perfect. We can do that. I'd asked how you like to drink your coffee.
I am doing well. I went through a bout of Bell's palsy on the side of my face, and a little disturbing because when it first hits, not having had it or a stroke, uh, I wasn't sure I wasn't having a stroke, but uh, I uh, I got mental help very quickly and was assured it was Bell's palsy, which is a lot better than a stroke. It's not great. It made my speech very garbled. At times, I sometimes say I looked and sounded like Jean Chrétien. And of course, back when he was young and had Bell's palsy, they didn't have the knowledge they have of it today. But he survived and did very well despite all that.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a
So
very scary
how are you
feeling.
doing?
I'm good. Doing better than that. I don't know if we get to have much of a conversation.
You're,
I should just be like, you take over and tell us a story.
we are at least partway through this whole pandemic thing, which has been a real pain. I have worked apartment here in Calgary now for the last almost 15 months, uh, and have not been able to go out and do interviews and the stuff that I love to do. They had younger people doing, or one younger person has done all the work for me, and then I sit here in my apartment and write my features for CT, and that's about it. I haven't been in a church in all those months either. I watch it on live stream and can't wait for the day when I can bust out of here and once again resume something of a normal life.
Yeah, we're having some technical challenges for people. So just if you're jumping on and tuning in with us and you think these two aren't even having the same conversation, just roll with it. Because Darrel's awesome that I don't even need to ask questions. He'll just start telling you stories and it will be fine. So we're just going to give it a go this morning. But I can imagine, Darrel, I'm not sure if you can hear my question, but it probably feels from someone who was so very social and community involved to go to the exact opposite has probably been challenging.
Oh, it has. It really has. There's so much that I miss. For example, going to be something of a stampede this year, but for the second year in a row, I will not be seeing the BMO Farm Family Awards, which was one of my favorite things to do at Stampede time. Uh, Also, things like the Willow Creek Gospel Music Jamboree out at Granham, south of High River, south of Claire's home. I do enjoy that, and this is the second year I won't be doing that. Also, the second year I won't be doing the French Wind River Valley Gospel Jamboree at Shaunavon, Saskatchewan. There's so much stuff that I miss so very, very much. And those are things that I can't say I live for, but I certainly look forward to tremendously. Look forward to at least some of it resuming next year, provided enough people get vaccinated. And the vaccine seems to be doing its job for most of us. So certainly looking forward to a more open world.
Yeah,
I'm
it
looking
feels
forward to having
hopeful.
live coffee with you.
Yes, we definitely need to have an in-person coffee. That will be the best. So last week we had one of your fellow cohorts on the show. Mr. Don Wood was chatting with us last Friday, and he was sharing some pretty good stories. And the two of you are like our Silver Fox veterans of the broadcast world.
Well, we've been at it a long time. On July 1st will be 58 years since I began my career in a little radio station in Altona, Manitoba, and never dreaming that as I approach the age of 80, I would still be working. I'm loving it. The inspired Albertan features that I do for CTV now are probably the most fun I've had. I mean, it was fun sitting alongside Bar Higgins for 21 and a half years, doing the news. It was fun working with you as we launched the Eagle 100.9 back in 2003. Can you believe that's going on 2 years in a couple of years? Amazing.
So weird.
How and what's amazing is you look exactly like you did then. I don't. I've aged. You know, it's funny. There are stages of life in which you age, and I have found that the 60 to 80 has really brought some aging in my life. Until then, I looked much the same. Now, a lot of people flatter me and say, "You still look like you did then." No, I don't. I have pictures to prove it. But overall, the career has been very rewarding. I lived places, did things that no kid from a farm at Main Center, Saskatchewan, would reasonably expect to do when you're growing up there and looking out at the wide world and thinking, man, I'm going to travel to a lot of places in this world as part of my work, and also do a job that because even as a kid, I loved listening to the news on radio. There was no television, but it was just so much fun for me listening to the news and knowing what was going on. And in grade 7, beating the grade 12s in the current affairs quizzes because I knew any of them.
Well, and you've seen so many, I would just think, even in that 58 years of your career, let alone your life, you've seen so much different news happening over this time frame. Like, how wild is that?
Well, in the fall of 63, I started in 62 in Altona, and in the fall of 63, I had my first TV job. It was a combined radio TV. They were all combined at that time. And it was in Moose Jaw. And Moose Jaw had the first CTV station in Saskatchewan. And so I got my there in October of 1963. And just a few weeks later, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. That's the first of what I call the milestone events in my career. That one remained the milestone event for a long time. I mean, there were minor changes in things. For example, in 1964, in 1964, I did first the election. It was Saskatchewan provincial election. And it was when Tommy Douglas had left after years as premier, to go run the newly minted federal NDP, and had left a man named Woodrow Lloyd in charge of Saskatchewan. But people in Saskatchewan were angry at the CCF, as it was known at that time, and they booted them out of power and elected the Liberals under a man named Ross Thatcher. And so my first election, there was a change of government. And until I got to Alberta, I did a lot of changes of government. But in Alberta, all the elections I did, the PCs won, Peter Lougheed, the first 4 elections I did, I think. And then it was Don Getty, and then it was Ralph Klein. And the last premier, I guess, in my time, anchor would have been Alison Redford. And of course, Ed Stelmach in there as well. So I saw a lot of government changes elsewhere, but it wasn't until I was off the anchor deck that there was government change in Alberta.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I feel like for anybody who is outside of the industry, working election nights is always an interesting sort of thrill all to itself.
Mm. Oh yeah, so much fun doing those things. That and leadership conventions. Today, leadership conventions involve technology so much they don't look much fun as they used to be. But I got sent to Ottawa, for example, for the Conservative Leadership Convention when Brian Mulroney became leader. I anchored the one in Edmonton on Getty, became the success. And when Ed Stelmach was elected leader, I was in Edmonton for that as well. But today, the leadership conventions, all the voting is done online, and they don't have the big route that they did back then. So many things have changed. And the technology has been such a big part of that change. When I started in Altona, Cambridge, which was a technology. In 1966, while I was working in Saskatoon, I saw and used my first ever cassette recorder. Young people today don't know what a cassette recorder is, but I remember when it came along. Until then, we used a small suitcase-sized reel tape recorder and do our interviews. So things have just changed so drastically.
Well, yeah, now you can do a full newscast or broadcast from your telephone, let alone the suitcase you used to have to carry.
Yeah, news. Well, when I got into the business, radio was still king. Newspapers were actually king. Year after year, there'd be polls, and people would say that their number one source of news was the newspaper. Number 2 was radio. Number 3 was television. 1968, for the first year, people said TV was their number one source of news. And that changed everything. And that's after that, young guys like me wanted to be in television instead of in radio, or in both, which we did a lot of back then. And after my time in Saskatchewan, I did both. I was hired at the FCF in Montreal by the radio station, but the TV was in the same building, in fact, in the same newsroom. And soon I was doing both because I had experience in both. I was amazed in 2019 that the radio industry didn't do anything on its 100th birthday. If it had been something else celebrating 100th birthday, they'd have done something about it. But in radio, nothing was done. But it was 1919 that Guillermo Marconi put CFCF radio on the air in Montreal. It wasn't called that then, it XW10, something like that, and later became CFCF. But Marconi, who is one of the inventors of radio, started the first station in the world in 1919, in Canada, and yet nothing was ever said. And last year was the 100th anniversary of radio in the U.S. at KDKA in Pittsburgh, and I didn't see or read anything about that. I can't believe that a business that is so good at promoting all kinds of stuff did nothing about its own 100th anniversary.
Well, I think we learned in the industry, they're so focused on promoting everybody else's something. Media sources are not really very good at promoting themselves, especially radio.
Yeah, that's so true. And you know, my career has spanned as it from the invention of the to today, where while I sit here in my apartment, the photojournalist who does my interviews for me sends them to me on a thing called Otter, which both prints out the words and gives me the video as well. And so I sit here and write the story, pick my clips, voice track it right here on my iPhone with a microphone that is far more expensive than my iPhone, and it comes out great. And then I email back to my phoneist. He edits it, and it goes on the air as though I had been there all along myself. But it's amazing what we do with technology. And I was counting the other day. I have now done 60, I think 64 inspired Albertan features from my apartment
Wow.
since lockdown came.
That's unreal. I mean, it's cool. I love that technology is shifting like this because it gives big opportunity for the craft that we love on new platforms. So I think that's kind of exciting. Somebody made a comment, Darrel, that they hope you're writing a book or a memoir on your life. And I agree. And I also said this to Don last week when he was on the show, is that somehow I am going to try to capture. We're going to do a podcast series. I'm going to do one with Don, and I want to do one with you, and I want to capture your guys' stories in your career.
Oh, that's, I mean, I did a podcast the other day with one of the instructors at SAIT, who is a middle-aged, well, maybe even almost beyond middle-aged guy whom I taught there many, many years ago, and he's teaching there now. And he was not limited by time, and so we went nearly an hour and a half, and it was just such fun reminiscing and talking about the wonderful things I have been allowed to do, like going in 1980, which will this year be 40 years ago in September, to Baden-Baden, Germany, to cover Calgary's bid for the 1988 Olympics. And what fun we had, especially when Juan Antonio Samaranch said his dramatic way, he did it all in French, and then he got to the announcement, and he said, "Le Ville de," and he pauses, this dramatic pause, and says, "Calgary." And I was standing right beside Frank King, the head of the Calgary Bid Committee and later the CEO of the organizing committee. And Frank shot out of his chair like he was rocket propelled. And I got the first interview with him after we after all the backslapping and congratulating was done, I got the first interview, and over not far from me, Johnny Esau, who was in Sports first in law, and Clark Todd, the London bureau chief of CTV at the time, got the first interview with Ralph Klein. So we got all three of the main characters first before the mother corporation and any else got them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So many
That's
good
just
things.
one of my stories. And yes, I am writing an autobiography. I haven't done much work on it over the last 14 months, but I'm going to get back on it and try and get it. I'm hoping to get it published probably for Christmas 2022. I'm hoping that, and it's got some fun stories, and it's got a whole chapter on Don Wood, and another whole chapter on David Spence, who just announced his retirement. Can you believe it? This young kid who succeeded Don on the is now retiring. I mean, it's crazy how this world is aging, and yet we aren't.
We aren't, but they're welcome to it. We'll just stay like this. Yeah. I love that. Well, I want to be conscious of time for people this morning having coffee with us. And I know we've had a bit of challenge with our technology, but I just want to say thank you so much for having coffee. And we're going to do it again and again, and then hopefully in person too. But I hope you have an amazing rest of your Friday, Mr.
Too. Have a great. Thanks, Jody.
All right, friends. I don't know if we're gonna lose them. Our technology, it held on better than we thought it was going to. So have an amazing rest of your Friday, my friends. Cheers to you. And we will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Thank you, Darrel.